All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Lily's Show and Tell series. And as Cassandra was saying earlier, before we begin, we have just housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and it'll be sent out by the end of the week. Feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on the chat and I'll ask our speaker towards the end of the presentation. And finally, if you want to learn more about Lily, you can or present your own show and tell. I will write Cassandra's and email address in the chat. And now to our speaker, Monica Maher, online learning and education librarian at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, presenting from in-person to online and back again, converting information literacy instruction between formats.
Hello, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. All right, is that looking good?
Yes, looks great.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you everyone for being here. Yeah, my name is Monica. I'm going to be presenting on some of my experiences from converting information literacy between formats. So in this presentation, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what I've discovered from converting my lesson plans between formats, that being before the pandemic, since the pandemic, and beyond. So I am the online learning librarian and education librarian at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. We're a metropolitan university in Omaha, Nebraska. You can see a photo of our building right there. So here in the bullet points, I've just got a little bit of our enrollment to give you an idea of where I'm coming from. So for a little bit of a timeline, I started in this current role in 2019. And then our university went remote due to COVID in March of 2020. So that was during
introducing yourself.
The first couple months of the spring 2020 semester. So I had a full spring semester, the summer sessions, and then fall semester with my lesson plans. And they were all pretty much face-to-face with, maybe one or two being held over Zoom for some distance graduate sessions. And then after that, we just went like completely online. So all the sessions that I taught were remote then, from spring 2020 until fall of 2022 semester. So I had a good like 5 semesters to get comfortable with online planning until things pretty much came back to face-to-face again. So I do have kind of 2 roles in my position here. So in my role as the online learning librarian, I am responsible for maintaining and sustaining our like general LibGuides. So that's kind of like a learn about the library guide, the basic online tutorials guide, the citation style guides, as well as subject-specific ones that I create for my liaison areas and in some courses that I teach if they have specific LibGuides for those courses. For our Canvas integrations, I'm responsible for that as well. So we have that little library resources tab in all of our Canvas courses, and they integrate with Canvas with the subject-specific guides based on course prefixes. So I do all of that creation and maintenance, as well as the maintenance of a lot of our online tutorials. So this is a lot of our academic videos. So like database demos, citation management tutorials, how to use the VPN, how to use ILL, that kind of like general library info stuff. I also put Articulate Storyline on here. That used to be a big piece of my job. We no longer use that since it was like Flash-based. I don't know if anyone else has used that, but that used to be a big chunk of my time, but we no longer use it. So then the other side of my job is the education librarian. So this is my role as the liaison to the College of Education, Health and Human Sciences. and all the departments within that college. And then I also liaise to the psychology department in the arts and sciences college as well. So this is kind of like, that traditional liaison work. I developed a collection in these areas. I take research consults from faculty and students. This is also where I teach the information literacy sessions. So I teach information literacy sessions to these groups of students for these faculty members. So on our campus, we aren't embedded librarians, so I typically do one-shot info lit sessions. And most of the sessions that I teach are research-focused undergraduate courses. So an undergrad course where they will have some sort of research component where they'll need to be using the library resources. I also teach a lot of graduate courses where they, tend to do a lot of research, a lot of writing um, in those courses. And the subject material is typically pretty specific, and the learning outcomes are also, typically quite specific based on the class and the type of research that they're doing and the kind of assignments that they're maybe working towards creating and completing at the end of the semester. So a lot of these classes are going to be working on like lit reviews that I teach, or just like a more traditional research paper. Um, Also, some of these grad courses, especially like in educational leadership or teachers ed, they're kind of putting together pieces or chapters of their dissertation or just kind of like collecting and organizing those references that they plan to use as they begin reading and writing for their dissertation. So I bring this up because I do think that my role as the online learning librarian did help me as I was kind of transitioning to online teaching just because I did have more involvement with aspects of digital instruction and like the digital components that the digital softwares that we have on our campus. Um, so I'd been a part of the digital learning group on campus. I had also kind of cultivated strong ties with the Office of Accessibility on campus. And I would recommend, if you're working on in an academic library to kind of create those bonds on your campus. Especially, I want to say with the Office of Accessibility Services, if you can do so. They've helped me with digital accessibility questions like so many times throughout my time at the university. And it's also just a really important component to keep accessibility in mind as librarians, since we want as many people as possible to be able to access the precious resources that we hold. So that's one thing that I tried to keep in mind as I was converting my lessons to online material, as well as that um, I did want to preserve kind of the essence of what I was doing in the classroom to kind of preserve the feelings or the pieces of what was working well, but I wanted to, still make sure that it was accessible for students over the internet. So when we went remote, I think in conjunction with these roles, I kind of had two different experiences. Like I felt two different ways. So for like the online learning side of things and my role there, like the Canvas and the LibGuides and all that stuff, I felt really prepared. We didn't think we were like, there's no way that we're gonna ever go off campus, but people are talking about it and like other parts of the world. So digital learning and my department here in the library had some plans for like what we would do just in case, um, like library resources wise, if we were to move remote. Um, so I had been really on top of updating all of our Canvas integrations and just making sure that our LibGuides were functioning and the links were working. And I had created a shared folder in our video software so that I could share tutorial videos with like anyone across the library, and it would be really seamless and easy, and it was like all great. So I did feel really supported there by the leadership in the library and by our collaborators across campus, like the Office of Accessibility Services and Digital Learning. Um, I felt like, digital accessibility was like always on the forefront of everyone's mind, and just making sure that everything was going to be available to students no matter what. So again, we didn't really think that anything was going to happen. So I was doing this work and just kind of thinking that, this is good prep for like that what if scenario, but also, it's going to help our current distance students who are remote and don't come on campus anyways. So, it's a huge win-win. And then when we did actually go remote, it did feel pretty sudden. It moved pretty fast. And that's when I realized that I needed to turn my attention from the library resources in general, and kind of really focus more on my subject-specific instruction. So I did like have sessions, info lit sessions scheduled. And then all of a sudden I was kind of, emailing, reaching out to the instructors, and I was like, so are we holding this class on Zoom now? And they were like, are we? I don't know. So it was a huge learning curve for everyone. I definitely tried a lot of things. Some of them did not work. But I think that what helped me the most was just kind of considering, what the student learning outcomes were that I was trying to teach to, and then like what that essence of the active learning activities that I was doing in person were, and then just trying to keep that same vibe with that same learning outcome in the online instruction. So faculty collaboration. I haven't changed my method of reaching out to faculty throughout this whole time period, so it's all been primarily email based. I'll send out emails when there are pertinent library updates, like at the start of the semester. I'll send these emails to the faculty liaison to the library, and I ensure that each department has one person who um, has agreed to share my updates and forward them to their colleagues in that department. So sometimes this will be the department chair, but sometimes it's not. But this method has worked really well for me. And if the current liaison leaves, I can either ask the chair who they want to be the new one, if they want to be the new one, or I can also ask one of the faculty that I know in that department who is a good advocate for the library, to kind of take that role on. Another thing that I've always done is email new faculty when the employee directory comes out. So if there's a new faculty member hired, I just like to email them directly so they have my email, and just to kind of reiterate what faculty services the library can offer them and what I can do for them. So I include the faculty services like in my beginning of the semester email to the whole department as well, but I like to send it specifically to new faculty as well. And it's typically after sending out these emails, that's when I get a lot of responses from new faculty, either with, questions that they need clarified, or with asking me to come in and teach to their students. So I think just flexibility is really important in creating these meaningful relationships. I like to ask faculty when I'm kind of when I'm creating a lesson plan for their session, um, to share with me their desired learning outcomes for the library session, or even just to share with me like the learning outcomes for their class, if that's, on their syllabus or somewhere. Um, I think that beginning that kind of relationship and like basing our conversation on how we can best meet students' needs, um, has proven to be a really great way to get started kind of building a good working and like collaborative bond between us. The faculty on our campus have responded really well to this, and it helps me to know and suggest resources to them as well, as and formats for like the type of instruction and for other stuff for their class too. So some of the synchronous formats. So for my one-shot sessions, what I typically like to do is incorporate some type of active learning in every session. I think that's been really important to our department as a whole, and I definitely see, feedback from students when there's some type of active learning. It's a lot easier to engage with the material, and it feels less boring and tedious. So before we went online, one thing that we would do in my courses quite frequently is kind of speak as a large group and discuss aspects of the type of research that the students would be needing for their assignment, or just like for the research course in general. And a good example of this is for some teachers' education classes that I teach. They focus really heavily on um, finding empirical research from the last 10 years based on teaching methods or like assessment methods. And so I had found that in an in-person setting, especially for those undergrad classes, it was helpful to begin um, with an exercise by kind of having them pull up their assignment and kind of experience in real time with me, like how to read through a research assignment, since many of the students had not had something assigned to them of that caliber before. So we do kind of like a brief like scavenger hunt in Canvas, with the outcome being that students would know how to locate the criteria for their assignment. So like I said, there was like a lot of criteria, like had to be empirical, had to be peer reviewed, had to be from the last 10 years, had to, this many articles based on this type of strategy or this type of assessment method. So it was important for them to kind of understand how to locate that criteria, and then how to kind of put that into practice when they were then beginning to do their research in order to, be efficient with their research strategy and with their time as well, since a lot of these students have a lot on their plate and they're taking so many courses. So once they found that, we'd kind of work on that comprehension of the criteria that they had found on their own in a large group setting. And then once we had a definition of what empirical research was in that large group, we could then kind of move on to a database and begin discussing keywords, how to use keywords, and then finally we would take like that definition of empirical article and kind of discuss how those words that they used for the definition that they had identified as words describing empirical research, you can also use those in the database as keywords to denote to the database, this is the type of article that I'm looking for. So with that being said, that long active learning process, used it a lot in person. One of my key takeaways from teaching Zoom that I realized like after the first session was that things take so much longer on Zoom than they do face to face. I was like blown away by this. So, like I said, I wanted to keep these discussions because they relate to the learning outcomes in the online format. And like that was important to me. But I found that I couldn't fit in as much instruction um, of resources if we wanted to keep the active learning in this session. Um, and this was like pretty hard for me to gauge like the timing. It's still kind of difficult for me. It took a lot of trial and error for me to determine what I could fit into a Zoom session versus what I could fit into a face-to-face session. And I found myself removing some databases from class sessions. So I was still showing students where the recommended databases were for that subject area. And, I would still call out one or two that we wouldn't be getting to today as another option for searching. But then I would only really do like a demonstration or ask them to click into maybe one, two, or three that I thought would maybe mesh best with their topic that they were researching, or with the research that they were needing to find. Also, in some of our sessions, we'd go over citation management tools. Our library uses Zotero. I found it really hard to teach that over Zoom just because it takes a long time. It's a lot of jumping around from, this website to that website to my Microsoft Word to my Zotero page. Um, so I just found that to be really cluttered. I thought, a lot of times when I show that to students, like they think it's amazing, but they think it's kind of confusing too. So I just found that from feedback to be a little too much. So what I did there was I decided to create some 3 videos related to Zotero. So there's downloading video, a video on saving references, and a video on using Zotero and Word. And whenever an instructor would ask for Zotero instruction, I would share those videos with the class, so they could go over them on their own, and then just make sure that they knew how to reach me for questions via email or for research consultations in person or on Zoom, so that we could, work through it one-on-one if they needed a little more support in using those citation management systems. So going back to the active learning piece and the discussions, I definitely think this varies from course to course. So like I said, this presentation is pretty much my experiences, and you might be able to kind of generalize some of those and use them in your teaching as well. But I do think, everyone knows their class is best. So just definitely consider that all this stuff like varies course to course. But I found that the students in online sessions, they really did not feel comfortable speaking in a large group settings. Like they did not want to come on the microphone no matter what. And like I was always doing these large group discussions and face to face, and it like wasn't an issue. Every now and then you get a quiet class, but usually I could wait them out and we would be able to like start a better discussion. But students like did not want to come on the microphone in front of the whole class over Zoom. So to remedy this, we started using breakout rooms. There was definitely some growing pains there as well, as myself and teaching faculty kind of figured out how to use the breakout rooms function. But once we got that put together, I found that students, they could go off into their small groups and then they were more comfy talking to each other. Another thing that I noticed was at first I was worried. I didn't know if like students would talk to each other in those small breakout rooms and do what I was asking them to, or if they would be like confused or have questions. So I would say we're going to go into small, breakout rooms. I want you guys to discuss a definition for empirical research, and I'm going to be jumping around into the rooms. And I found that when I would come into a room, they would be like talking and then they would immediately stop talking when I came into the room. So I think that it was like intimidating for them to have me come in. They didn't like being like watched over. So that really wasn't working out. So ended up just doing the breakout rooms. We would send them off into the breakout rooms. Their instructor and I would stay in the main Zoom room and just bring them back after, 5 minutes had passed or whatever. And the students, they would come back with their definitions ready to go. They would do, what I had asked them to do. It didn't seem as though they had questions in that room. If they did have questions, they would usually bring them right back and type them into the chat. So the students, I think, really adapted to Zoom pretty well as they could when they needed to. So that was great. Also during this time, it was kind of nice for the instructor and I to just be able to chat a little bit without the students in the room, to kind of just talk about maybe things that had changed or maybe many topics that the instructor had seen a lot of her students being interested in since we had last collaborated on a lesson plan together. So that kind of helped me to get a better feeling for the rest of the session. maybe determine what type of example search I would use or keywords I would use or specific topics that maybe, lent themselves better to a different database than what I had been planning to show. So I could make those edits really quickly during that time when the students were in the breakout rooms. I also think that telling the students before they went into those breakout rooms to pick a person to speak when they came back was really helpful. And also, if nobody wants to talk, I'm fine with having students type in the chat as well. So I think just being flexible with that on Zoom really helped me to just keep that essence of the active learning and to also encourage students to be engaged and you know um do mean be meaningful in their actions on online during the lesson plan session. Um, and in my experiences with Zoom, I found that the most important students to get out of Zoom since then and to get back into the library actually, and I don't know if this probably isn't surprising, but the students that I really like to have in person in the library are undergraduates. A lot of them have told me in sessions or in feedback forms that they have never or have rarely come into the library because they didn't really realize all the stuff that we had in the building. That's like research and instruction services, but that also includes like checkout materials and stuff. Um, and also they're not aware of those services that we can provide to them. So those research consults or those citation consults. So based on this feedback, I found that undergraduates who are in in-person classes are also more likely to reach out to me later in the semester for an in-person or an online consult, or to just email me through email with questions. And the students that I saw, undergrads, especially on Zoom, were less likely to do so. I haven't really found this to be the case with grad students. They seem to reach out after they've met with me over Zoom or face-to-face with pretty similar frequency. So I mentioned the videos that I created related to Zotero, that citation management software. So I just wanted to chat a little bit about asynchronous formats as well. And like I've said, being flexible is like one key takeaway in this for sure. I think just like in librarianship as well. But just because a learning outcome was synchronous at one point doesn't mean it has to be that way forever. And I have really appreciated having collaborative relationships with the faculty that I liaise with because they have allowed me to try new things, which in turn makes things more beneficial and more useful for their students, which is the overarching goal in the end. So one way that I reached students during the pandemic was creating Canvas modules specific to library resources for specific courses. So these modules would contain the same information that I'd go over in a class. So they weren't exactly the same as the library resources tab that appears in Canvas. That library resources tab in Canvas provides library resources specific to that major or that course prefix. So like, library resources for teacher education, whereas these courses would be specific to the class and that course's specific learning outcomes. So, um, like theories of reading literacy, stuff like that. And um, so some of the courses that I created modules for during the pandemic, they're still using the library Canvas module, even though they're now meeting face to face. So with modules like this, it's important to realize that there's a workload that goes along with them. You can't just create them and leave them. They do require maintenance in order to ensure all the pieces still function properly. So like in these quizzes or modules, I'm putting links, I'm putting videos, even like the formatting of the different pages, like where the text lays, um, that can all get messed up and it needs to be checked on. Um, So these modules, I usually create them in a Canvas development course. I then roll them into Canvas Commons where a faculty member can just add them into their course. I typically create modules using pages. That's what the picture is on the screen right now, or create quizzes related to the library subject material. So those are the two ways that I typically use Canvas. And in my experience, these types of modules work really well when the faculty member has a lot of information that they'd like you to include with your basic information literacy information. So I don't know if anyone's ever taught a one-shot session and the faculty has like so much stuff that they want you to mention that you're kind of having trouble getting like all the instruction points in there as well. Um, so I think that this type of format can really suit that situation well. So you're typically going to have a lot of information to cover here. And by allowing students to parse through all that info that the faculty member says they need and allowing them to do that kind of on their own time asynchronously, you're allowing them to view it in chunks instead of having to sit through a presentation where you're just like throwing a ton of different stuff at them all at once. They're not going to be able to actively listen to all of that. It's going to be like info overload. So I find that with courses like that or session requests like that, an asynchronous format might be a little better suited to that type of instruction. And I also think that this format is well suited to courses that have a lot of students. So, you know, those courses with over 100 students or those courses that maybe have fewer students, but a ton of sections of the course. It can really save you a lot of time as a librarian if you don't have to meet with every single section of, you know, like Psych 101. You can instead just send out this quiz or send out this module to help students get acquainted with the library resources that they're going to need for that class. And one issue with this type of learning tool that I've found is that you are kind of losing that face time with students, whether it's virtual or real. You're not really getting like that conversation with them, right? So one way that I've kind of tried to bridge this is to create a welcome video at the beginning of the module or quiz. So I just like film myself, I put my face on it, just to kind of explain who I am, what the library can do for them, and how I can help them. Um, because I've always found the students who I interact with are the ones that are more likely to reach out later in the semester when they need help. And with this format, while you can't be certain that a student has watched the whole video or, you know, like felt that connection from your welcome video, I still do think that it kind of helps to bridge that gap in a small way. And hopefully will make students feel a bit more comfortable reaching out, should they, you know, need service or help in the future. Okay. Finally, assessment strategies. Um, Evaluation and just kind of self-reflection has been really imperative to this journey. So when we did mostly face-to-face instruction in 2019, I used to use exit slips for students. So that would just be me passing out, you know, post-it notes at the end of the session and before they leave, asking them to write one thing that they learned and one question they still had, or some iteration of that. During the pandemic, I tried to keep the essence of this alive. I used something called Padlet. I didn't love it. It was a little clunky. I know some people have had more luck with it. I used that for a little bit, and then I switched to Qualtrics, which is a software that our university provides. So Qualtrics has a lot of different survey formats, and I have used it since probably like 2021. I use it this semester as well to gather student feedback after sessions. I really like Qualtrics. I think it's great. But I think that I might switch back to just exit slips and post-it notes in the spring because I've been noticing that like more and more students aren't answering my Qualtrics when I ask them to at the end of the session. And I really, really value that feedback. So I'm considering going back to the post-it notes. But I still do like Qualtrics because it makes it really easy to analyze and like recognize patterns in student responses. But my best advice is to always analyze and take student and faculty feedback into consideration with your instruction plans. Um, I like to update my lesson plans every semester or every year, depending on how often that class is taught, which I think most people do this as well. Um, but I also like to keep a reflection journal where I try to spend a few moments, if I have the time, after each session, just to kind of like be in the moment and consider what went well, um, what I felt didn't go well, and then maybe just in the moment see if I have any like sparks, ideas of things that I would like to change and ways that I would change them. Then I take these personal notes into consideration with the feedback from students and with feedback from faculty if there is any when I'm updating my lesson plans. And I do find it best to kind of create those updated lesson plans um, as soon as I can after sessions. Otherwise, I don't know if anyone else is like this, but like sometimes my notes don't like make a ton of sense if I read them too far after I've written them. So I find it's best to do it as soon as you can find the time to do it so that you're like, those notes are still fresh. You still know what you were talking about. Um, I also always try to keep old copies of lesson plans so that I can compare and contrast. This has been really important to me, especially updating lesson plans over Zoom and onto face-to-face. Sometimes you will like have a session and you're like, it was okay, but what if I change this? And then the next time you teach it, the thing that you changed like totally flops and you were like, wow, it was a lot better the first time. So it's important to keep those old copies just so that you can switch it back or take advice from your old self when you try to re-update it for another time. So um, I just keep all my lesson plans labeled with the semester that I taught them and the course name. That type of organization has worked really well for me. It's pretty simple, but I think it is pretty intuitive, and that's what I use for all my instruction. Um, I also use something similar to this for like my written expository text and scripts for those Canvas modules. So that can come in handy, especially if you like want to reuse some of those module pieces. Like I have a few classes that have modules and they have like a page for APA. And there might be a few course specific items related to APA citation, but there's also a lot that can be reused for different classes. So just kind of saving yourself the time then. Also really helps for updating videos if you need to make changes to those videos to have those scripts handy and in a spot where you can find them. And this has been my presentation. Again, these were my experiences, so I hope that you can find something useful that you might be able to use in your own instruction. But thank you for listening and let me know if you have questions.
All right, thank you so much, Monica. That was such a helpful presentation. And I have a couple of questions to ask. One of them I'm asking myself because I was an undergraduate student during the pandemic. So I know a lot of people, including myself, had Zoom fatigue. So my question is, how did you deal with Zoom fatigue? Even though I know you talked about the breakout rooms, did you have any other strategies to help students dealing with Zoom fatigue?
Yeah, definitely. So I think when I took a class during the pandemic as well, I really thought sometimes you just need a break. So if I was discovering that a lot of the students, like maybe we started with a lot of videos on and now they're all off, or I'm asking for something and no one's like putting it in the chat, a lot of like those similar just kind of disengaged behaviors that you would see in the classroom. Um, I would say, I think that we need to take a break. Like, let's just take 5 minutes and then we'll come back to it. And typically after those 5 minutes, a lot of students would be more ready to engage. or would, turn their videos back on or type in the chat box. So um, I don't have um, any like special tricks besides for just like, yeah, you need to get off Zoom for a few minutes because Zoom fatigue is real and it is intense at times.
I agree. Well, thank you for that. The next question is, how do you approach the faculty when they're asking for too much content in a one shot? Was it hard to sell to get faculty to embrace this learning tool?
So I think that for faculty, when they're asking for too much, what I typically do is I will tell them that I'm going to send them a lesson plan, and that we can tweak it and edit it as we get closer to the session. So when I send them the lesson plan, I'm always like, here's the lesson plan. Let me know what you think. And if they have asked for too much stuff, I will usually just tell them, like, here's my lesson plan. This is the amount of information that I believe we can get through in the 45 minutes allotted. A lot of times, they would be asking in addition for that Zotero instruction, and I would say, I've got these 3 Zotero videos you can share with your class in place of having that instruction, and I'm always available um, you know, um, for one-on-one appointments with students if they have questions about it going forward. And a lot of faculty were okay with that. I did have some faculty who were like, no, I want you to do Zotero. In which case, we kind of already had that communication open where I was like, I'm sending you the lesson plan, let me know what you think. So if they say no, like this isn't gonna work, I want Zotero in there, then I can come back and say, okay, well, um, Zotero typically takes this many minutes in the courses that I teach it in. So we can either take out, education source, or we can take out the discussion of keywords, like what do you want to take out? Just so that that lesson plan is out there so they know what I was planning to do and then what I'm removing. So hopefully, maybe they'll be able to kind of give their students that context, especially if, it's like talking about keywords. Maybe they can give their students a little bit of keyword instruction before we meet up, or just like show them a database or something like that. Just keeping that communication open, I think, is really important. And then with the Canvas modules, I didn't have any trouble getting faculty to buy into the Canvas modules. And that a big piece of that is that faculty use Canvas in their courses. So the faculty here, they build their courses in Canvas. So it's not a new tool to them. It's very they're used to it. They use it. So um, they were they were pretty open to it. I did have a few faculty struggle to roll it into their course, but that was pretty easily remedied with help from either IT services, or we can talk over email and they can figure out how to stick it into their course.
All right, thank you so much. The next question is, what is your success rate using asynchronous training in Canvas? We struggle getting students to complete any non-credit instruction in Canvas.
Right. So I don't have a specific success rate. So these would be, I give these to the faculty, and they decide if they want to like make it required or not. They decide if they want to give students points or not. The only feedback that I really get from that is when students will fill out the Qualtrics form um, at the end of the module, which I know that that is like probably the students who are like doing it and getting the most out of it are the ones that make it to the Qualtrics form and actually fill out the Qualtrics form. So they all love it, but um, I get feedback from them, and then I also get feedback when a student will schedule with me from that class. So I know which classes have the instruction modules, and then if they schedule with me and we're talking about their assignment, I can put 2 and 2 together and realize that um, they probably found my information from that Canvas module, um, and that's how they reached out to me. So I would say I know that I helped create a pretty big Canvas module for communication studies, a speech class on campus. And that one, um, that one does get a lot of student completion, and it's because the instructor has it for credit. So I think that, yeah, that's a tough one. I think that you really need faculty buy-in. And I think that having faculty either like really, really push that their students need to be watching this, that helps a lot, or putting it for points. I think that those are probably the two best ways to get students to complete it. Otherwise, yeah, I think that students completing it without, reason to do so, that can be tough.
Our next question is if you could elaborate more on what's included in the Canvas modules.
Yeah, so the Canvas modules, maybe like a typical Canvas module would be like a welcome to the library video with my face. Here's my contact information. So it would be like a video of me and then a link to schedule an appointment with me and my email address. Then maybe on the second page, we would be talking a little bit about keywords. And this might be where I write some expository text, or you could pull in like a YouTube video if you have one on keywords that you really like. I have a worksheet from Qualtrics that is, a keywords worksheet. You can pop that in there, have students complete that and send it to you or their instructor. The next page would probably be a lot of database demos. So I have database demos for a lot of the databases that we have on campus, and it can be as course specific or general as you want. So, very basic like um, EBSCO database. Here's how you do a search. Let's pretend that this is our keyword. I'm pressing search. Here's how you get the PDF. Here's how you get the permalink, like that kind of stuff. Or it can be very course specific where we might be talking about a specific topic or a specific type of article that they need to find. So you can determine what types of database demonstrations you want to put in there. A lot of courses, they also have either like a research methodologies page or a page with resources for lit reviews, how to like find, how to organize, how to write lit reviews. Um, a lot of courses will also have a page related to citation styles. So with that, I would usually link out to like the university's citation guide, um, the catalog where we have the MLA or APA handbook, the Purdue OWL, um, other resources that might be helpful for students with citations. And then typically on the last page, I will kind of try to sum everything up, put another link to schedule an appointment with me, put a link to a feedback form where they can, also enter a question if they have, or just give me feedback on the module. And that's kind of what a typical research module will have in it for the library resources. So it's a lot of what you would cover in like an information literacy class.
Thank you. So we have just two more questions. So the next question is, have you ever tried hybrid workshops? If so, did you have a specific activity that you would do that worked?
I have not ever done hybrid, so I don't have any advice for that. I know that some of my colleagues have. So I'll chat with them and see what they have to say. Um and maybe we'll have to present on that in the future.
And then the last question I have is, do you keep stats on how many students slash classes you teach? And do the Canvas modules factor into those stats somehow?
Yeah, so we use Spring Share, so like Lib Answers, Lib Insight is what we use. They do factor in. We have Lib Insight forms for synchronous instruction and asynchronous instruction. So the forms, they look a little bit different. But I fill out both of those, and then at the end of the year I have those stats that are separated. between synchronous, which would be the face-to-face and the Zoom sessions, and then the asynchronous, which would be those modules that I create for Canvas. And I just include the ones that I create like an actual quiz or like an actual module for. I don't include like subject specific videos for courses. Like if there's an instructor who's like, oh, hey, can you like really quick make me a video about, site specific searching on Google, and I'll like make them a video really quick. I don't include that in asynchronous just because um I kind of view that as like a standalone video. I don't that doesn't feel like the full instruction um combination to me. So that's what I include in the asynchronous form.
Okay. And that is all the questions that we have. Thank you again, Monica, for your presentation. And our next show and tell will be on January 10th, and we hope to see everyone there.
Thank you.